You know, in every home, there's this small, kind of boring looking box of switches. We all have one. And most of us, well, we pretty much ignore it until the lights suddenly go out. But that little box is working silently, 24/7, to prevent an absolute disaster. Today, we're pulling back the cover on this unseen firefighter, your circuit breaker. I mean, really think about that for a second. We have all this powerful electricity running through our walls, all the time. So what's the one thing that stops a tiny little problem, like a frayed lamp cord, from turning into a huge catastrophic fire? Well, the answer is something you've definitely seen, but you might not fully get just how important it is. And that hero, of course, is the circuit breaker. It really is the unsung guardian of your home's entire electrical system. And it's not just some simple on-off switch. Oh no, it's an incredibly smart safety device. At its core, a circuit breaker has just one single, absolutely critical job: to protect you and your home from too much electricity. The very moment it senses a dangerous surge of power, it does the only thing it's designed to do. It instantly cuts the power to that part of your house. It stops a potential fire dead in its tracks before it can even think about starting. But how does it know, right? How can this little plastic switch actually sense electrical danger? Well, it's not magic, it's just a really brilliant piece of engineering. And to understand it, we're going to use a super simple analogy that makes the invisible world of electricity, well, visible. Okay, I want you to imagine that the electricity flowing through your home's wires is just like water flowing through a pipe. It's that simple. And all your appliances, your TV, your toaster, your phone charger, they're all just different taps drawing water from that same pipe. So where does the circuit breaker fit in? It's the master safety valve on that pipe. So here's how it plays out. Normally, you've got a nice, steady flow, right? The water's just moving along. But then you start the microwave while the coffee pot is brewing. And then someone in the other room plugs in a hairdryer. See what's happening? That's like opening way too many taps at once. The system is trying to force a dangerous amount of water through the pipe. So the safety valve senses this pressure and bam, it slams shut to keep the pipe from bursting. That is exactly what's happening when your breaker trips. Now that too many taps situation has a name. It's called an overload. But that's not the only thing your breaker is looking out for. So let's take a look at the three main triggers that'll cause that safety valve to slam shut. All right, first up is the one we just talked about with our water analogy, this circuit overload. This is by far the most common reason your lights might suddenly go out. It happens anytime you try to pull more power from a circuit than it was ever designed to handle. It's just a simple, but yeah, potentially dangerous case of too much demand. And you've totally seen this in real life. Kitchens are a classic overload zone, right? You've got these power-hungry microwaves and coffee makers going at the same time. Things that generate a lot of heat, like space heaters and hair dryers, are another huge culprit. And this last one, plugging power strips into other power strips? Oh yeah, that is basically just asking for that breaker to trip. The second trigger is a whole different beast. It's much more sudden and honestly way more dangerous than a simple overload. It's called a short circuit. A short circuit happens when electricity takes a dangerous shortcut it's not supposed to. Normally, power flows in a nice, controlled loop. But if a hot wire accidentally touches a neutral wire, maybe because of old, cracked insulation or some other damage, the amount of current skyrockets almost instantly. The breaker senses this massive, violent surge and trips in a fraction of a second, preventing a very real fire hazard. Okay, so the third reason your breaker might trip is a little different. It's something called a ground fault, or you might just hear people call it a fault. So a ground fault is when electricity literally escapes its proper path and energizes something it should never, ever touch, like the metal casing of your washing machine. This instantly turns the appliance itself into a serious shock hazard. If you were to touch it, your body could become the path to the ground for all that electricity. That's why we have special breakers called GFCIs that are designed to detect even the tiniest amounts of this leaking current and shut off the power before you can get a nasty shock. Now, if you live in an older home, you might be thinking, hey, wait a minute, I don't have those little switches. You might have something else, a fuse box. It does the same job, but it does it in a much more, well, permanent way. The difference here is really simple, but it's super important. A fuse is a one-time use device. To stop a power surge, a tiny piece of metal inside of it literally melts and breaks the circuit. It makes the ultimate sacrifice, you could say. A circuit breaker, on the other hand, is totally reusable. It's just a switch that flips itself off. Once the danger is gone, you can just go and flip it right back on. Okay, so we know how they work, which is great. But now let's get to the most important part, how to live with them safely. Because knowing what they do is one thing, but knowing what not to do, that's what really counts. Please, if you take one thing away from this, let it be this idea. A tripped breaker is not just an inconvenience. It is the direct warning. It's your home's electrical system screaming at you that something is wrong. Just flipping the switch back on without figuring out why it tripped in the first place, that's exactly like hitting the snooze button on a fire alarm. So let's just run through the biggest mistakes to avoid. First, never ever ignore a breaker that trips over and over again. It's telling you there's a deeper problem that you probably need an electrician for. Second, don't daisy chain power strips. It's a classic recipe for an overload. Third, please don't use your breaker as a regular on-off switch. It's a safety device, not a light switch. And finally, take 5 minutes, seriously, that's all it takes, to figure out and label which breaker controls which rooms. It will save you a massive headache later, and it could even be a lifesaver in an emergency. Just remember, that little switch is your silent guardian, working around the clock to keep you safe. So the next time a breaker trips, don't just groan and see it as a hassle. Stop for a second and ask yourself, what is my home trying to tell me right now? Are you listening?